usual, I use the term loosely. I'm going to do a quick video today. We're going to talk about the inferior quality of cheap Chinese machining accessories. If you've read my website, you've heard me talk about the inferiority of cheap foreign-made inferior internal Harley engine parts, so you know what I think about that. Anyway, I have to make a batch of number 2 cam gear reamers, and I have been doing them with a dial indicator and indicating in the shafts on a 4-jaw chuck. Works fine, kind of a pain in the ass. I wanted to speed the process up, so I thought I would buy what's known in the trade as a 5C collet. They range in price from, I think this is $160 up to $500 or $600 for probably true machinist grade. Anyway, I bought this one, turned out to be a piece of crap. We'll go into why in just a moment. Okay, first of all, just to verify the setup and the theory of operation over here, we're going to indicate the runout on my lathe spindle. So I've got a Starrett dial indicator clamped into a quick change tool post holder, and we'll put a few thousandths preload on this thing. I'll zero up the dial. I'll point it in the direction that the camera's facing so you can get an idea what's going on. Anyway, here's the runout on my lathe spindle. Essentially zero, maybe a couple of 10,000ths, but pretty much essentially zero. So the lathe spindle is dead nuts right on. Okay, so let's talk about this thing for a moment. Got it out of the box, put the chuck key in it to rotate the threading collar in there that tightens the collets in. Thing would barely rotate. Took it apart. It was full of swarf, which is machining debris, chips and slivers, etc., etc. Cleaned all the swarf out of it, put it back together again. Still was difficult to rotate. After dicking with it for quite a while, what I found was one of these pinion gears had a burr on the edge and it was catching on the rack gear. Ground that off of there, smoothed it up, polished it a little bit, and the thing operated fine at that point, at least as far as rotating the pinion and the scroll was concerned. The next step, of course, was to chuck it up in the lathe. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I get this thing and I want to test it because the object here is to produce consistent results. Put a piece of drill right in here. I got to do some machining on it, and always have it center up the same every time without having to fool around with the dial indicator. So I put it in the lathe, and we're going to indicate the base of this thing just to see what it does. You know, I want to check this thing before I make a part on it and find out it's all jacked up. So I'll put a couple preload on it once again. And that actually is pretty good. That's not bad at all. You get these little momentary flickers there. It's probably a little dust or something on there. That's not too bad. I could live with that. So that's looking pretty good. I'm optimistic. Okay, so I've moved the dial indicator to the right, and I just want to, just out of curiosity, I check the nose of this thing. This is where it begins to get interesting. Got it zeroed for you. Look at that. We go from 0 to +4. 4 thousandths run out on the end of this thing. So that tells me that the center axis of this is not perpendicular to the base. It's still possible that the collet and whatever I put in it might be 0 because the outside doesn't matter. It's what the inside is ground to. So the next logical step, of course, is let's put a collet in there, let's put a precision shaft in there and see what it does. Okay, so what you're looking at is one of my number 2 cam reamers that I made. This shaft is round. I indicated it out when I made it in the first place in a 4-jaw chuck using the style indicator. So this thing is The shaft has a runout virtually a zero. I mean, maybe a couple of 10,000ths. And look what it's doing when it's bolted into our Chinese collet chuck. We go from 0 to 5 thousandths. Now, you know, that's worse than my 3-jaw chuck. You know, a collet chuck's supposed to be pretty much zero, you know, a couple of 10,000ths maybe. And just so you know, I've done this demonstration earlier today, and I decided to make a video about it so you guys could see what some of this Chinese machining stuff is like. You know, some of it's good quality, some of it's terrible. This I think is terrible. I mean, it looks nice, but functionally this thing is pretty much useless. If you started making parts on this thing and you didn't check any of this, it would machine a shaft round, but it would not be concentric to the center of the shaft. And every time you took the shaft in and rotated it, it would be out around. Well, it would be round, but it wouldn't be on center, I guess. Okay, and just for the sake of thoroughness, earlier today when I was checking this initially, I found a high spot and I marked it. And just in case the shaft was bent somehow and I didn't know it, I rotated the shaft 180 degrees and the high spot was still in the same place relative to the chuck. So I know it's the chuck that's screwed up and not the shaft. Had the high spot moved to the opposite side, for example, then I would say, well, my shaft is bent and the dial indicator is following the high spot on the shaft. But it's not. The chuck is screwed up. I'm sending this thing back. You know, like I say, I really don't like buying foreign stuff. You know, the highest quality American stuff is just so out of price for me. You know, by profession, I'm a mechanic. I do some machining, I do some welding. You know, I do a lot of things kind of as a side. But if I was doing, you know, high quality parts in a production machine shop, this stuff would be out of, you know, totally useless, completely unusable, substandard by any and all accounts, I would think. Anyway, don't buy this crap. I tried, it failed. Every once in a while, like in a state of weakness, you know, I'll say, well, Jesus, it's so much cheaper. How bad could it be? Well, it could be pretty bad, you know. Anyway, thanks for watching. I am out of here. Y'all have a good one.